A History of British India is a work published by James Mill. Option C. A History of British India was a famous work, historical work written by James Mill and published in 1817 during the period of the British colonial expansion in India. James Mill was a Scottish historian, political thinker, and economist associated with the philosophy of utilitarianism. Although he never visited India, his writing became highly influential in shaping British colonial understanding and administrative attitude towards Indian society and history. In his work, James Mill divided Indian society into three major periods: the Hindu period, the Muslim period, and the British period. This classification later became highly influential in colonial his historiography, though modern historians criticize it for being biased, simplistic, and heavily influenced by the colonial thinking. Mill believed that Indian society was socially and politically backward and argued that the British rule would bring progress, modernization, and better governance to India. The book strongly criticized Indian tradition, religions, customs, and political institutions and reflected the colonial mindset of the British intellectual during the 19th century. Because of its influential influence, many officials of the British East India Company studied the work while preparing for administrative services in India. So the people who used the Britishers, the British students who used to prepare for the Indian Civil Service examination, they used to read his work, James Mill's work. और इसीलिए they used to be so communally charged. तो उनके अंदर इतना ज़्यादा communal divide इसीलिए होता था because they used to study the work written by James Mill, which जो इसकी जो किताब थी A History of British India, that was part of the syllabus, and that is why they used to be so communally charged up, because James Mill had divided India on communal basis. He said that first India was ruled by the Hindu period, then it was ruled by the Muslim period, and now it is being ruled by the British period. So he had divided India into three communal period: Hindu, Muslim, and Christians. And this work is being studied by the people, by the students who are preparing for the Indian Civil Service examinations for becoming officials in the British East India Company. Hence, they are so communally charged up. A history of British India became important not only as a historical text but also because it shaped British educational policies, administrative thinking, and colonial interpretation of the Indian civilization. The work had a lasting effect on how Indian history was studied and presented during British rule. The other options are incorrect because Lord Canning was associated with the revolt of 1857 and the beginning of the Crown rule. Lord Dalhousie is known for a doctrine of lapse and administrative reforms, and Warren Hastings was associated with early East India Company administration rather than historical writing. Now, what did James Mill actually write in the book? James Mill divided Indian history into three periods: the Hindu period, the Muslim period, and the British period. The division later became widely known in colonial historiography. According to Mill, the Hindu period was dominated by superstition, social backwardness, caste divisions, and what he considered irrational religious practices. He wrote critically about Hindu society, custom, laws, and traditions, and claimed that Indian civilization lacked scientific and political progress. While discussing the Muslim period, Mill argued that political instability, despotism, and military conflicts dominated the India under the Muslim rule. He portrayed both Hindu and Muslim periods negatively and claimed that Indian society remained backward under indigenous rulers. So he said that when the Hindus were ruling, there was a lot of social backwardness, there was superstition, there was caste division, and the Hindu society, customs, laws, and tradition claim that he wrote that the Hindu society, customs, laws, and traditions, and claimed that Indian civilization lacked scientific and political progress. And he said when the Muslims were ruling, there was political instability, despotism, military conflict, and dominated the Muslim rulers. That there used to be a lot of military conflict and there was a lot of instability. He portrayed both Hindus and Muslim period negatively and claimed that Indian society remained backward under indigenous rulers. Hence, they needed the British rulers. That was the claim of James Mill. James Mill presented British rule as a civilizing force that would modernize India through Western education, rational administration, law, science, and economic reform. He believed that the British governance was superior to the previous Indian political system and believed that the British would improve Indian society socially, politically, and economically. The book also discussed Indian administration, revenue system, religions, social customs, trade, judicial practices, political institutions. Mill strongly criticized Indian religions and often dismissed Indian intellectual traditions. His writings reflected the colonial mindset of the period and justified British imperial control over India. One of the most important impacts of the book was British administrators and policymakers. Officials of the British East India Company frequently studied Mill's work while preparing for service in India. So, all the people who actually had to prepare for the British East India Company's officers, like officers' post, there used to be many exams that were held to be an officer in the British East India Company. So, all the people who were preparing for those exams, they had to study James Mill's work to sit in that exam. It was a part of their syllabus, the curriculum. As a result, the book significantly influenced the colonial administration and British educational policies. Modern historians heavily criticize James Mill because he wrote about India without ever visiting India and relied mainly on colonial records and European sources. His interpretation is considered biased, Eurocentric, and dismissive of Indian achievement in fields such as mathematics, philosophy, literature, science, art, and governance. So basically, he was definitely biased towards the Britishers, and he was very dismissive about the administration of individuals like Aryabhat, Bhaskaracharya, all these individuals that had actually existed in India. He was completely dismissive about them. He never bothered telling the world about. He never bothered telling the world that these people also existed in Indian history. He was purely focusing upon how he can show the world that Indians were backward and British rule was beneficial. So, this is James Mill. A History of British India is a work written by James Mill. All these three individuals, Lord Canning, Lord Dalhousie, and Warren Hastings, these are the British governors. They are not authors. They are British governors, governors of East India Company. And James Mill is an author. And he has actually never visited India. Right? I think I wrote this over here that he actually never visited India. He was a Scottish historian, political thinker, and economist associated with philosophy of utilitarianism, right? That you should utilize everything for your welfare. Okay, moving on. So, although he never visited India, remember this, he had never visited India, but he's writing so much about India, and his writings are becoming a part of the core syllabus of the individuals who were preparing for the examinations to be a part of British East India Company. Moving on. Ahmednagar was finally annexed by the Mughals in. When did the Mughals annex Ahmednagar? They actually annexed it in 1636, I think. Yes. So all the four options are wrong. All the four options are wrong. They actually annexed it in 1636 under Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan will annex Ahmednagar. So Ahmednagar was finally annexed by the Mughal Empire in 1636 during the reign of Shah Jahan. The Ahmednagar Sultanate was one of the five Deccan Sultanates that emerged after the decline of Bahmani Sultanate. It was founded by Nizam Shahi dynasty and became an important political power in the Deccan region. The Mughal Empire had been attempting to conquer Ahmednagar since the reign of Akbar. Since the time of Akbar, they were trying to conquer Deccan India, and part of Deccan India was Ahmednagar. By that time, the Bahmani dynasty had already fallen, and many smaller Deccan Sultanate Muslim dynasties had come out, and Ahmednagar was one of those. So they were trying, and even under Akbar, they were trying to capture India, to capture Ahmednagar and many other Deccan Sultanate, but he failed. Akbar was not able to capture Ahmednagar. The Deccan was strategically important because of its military strength, fertile territories, trade routes, and political influence. One of the most famous figure associated with the defense of Ahmednagar was Chand Bibi, who courageously resisted the Mughal attacks during Akbar's reign. Although the Mughal captured parts of the kingdom earlier, complete annexation did not occur immediately because of the continued resistance by the Deccan rulers and local nobles. During the reign of Shah Jahan, Mughal campaigns against the Deccan intensified. In 1636, Ahmednagar was finally defeated and fully annexed into the Mughal Empire. The victory strengthened the Mughal authority in the Deccan and increased the imperial control over South India. The annexation of Ahmednagar was also brought the Mughal into increasing conflict with emerging regional powers such as the Marathas and other Deccan sultanates like the Bijapur and Golconda. The other options are incorrect because the final annexation specifically took place in 1636 during Shah Jahan's reign. Therefore, the correct answer is 1636. So the final annexation of Ahmednagar will take place during the reign of Shah Jahan in 1636. The annexation of Ahmednagar by the Mughals was not a single sudden event, but a long and brutal struggle stretching across several decades during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. It formed one of the most important phases of Mughal expansion. Just give me a second. Just give me a minute. Hmm. Okay. Okay, coming back to the class. I'm sorry, I just got some message. So, annexation of Ahmednagar. The annexation of Ahmednagar by the Mughals was not a single event but a long and brutal struggle stretching across several decades during the late 16th and early 17th century. So it went on for a long time. The Mughals were trying to annex Ahmednagar, and Ahmednagar was showing resilience. It formed one of the most important phases of Mughal expansion into Deccan because Ahmednagar stood directly in the path of imperial southern expansion. The conflict involved Akbar's imperial ambitions, the political fragmentation of Deccan Sultanate, resistance led by Chand Bibi, Malik Amber's guerrilla warfare, and finally the gradual incorporation of the Nizam Shahi kingdom into the Mughal Empire under Shah Jahan. So when Ahmednagar basically surrendered under the Mughals, it was during the reign of Nizam Shahi dynasty. The struggle completely transformed Deccan politics and laid the foundation for the later Mughal Maratha conflict. To understand why the Mughals targeted Ahmednagar so aggressively, it is necessary to first understand the political condition of Deccan during the 16th century. After the decline of the Bahmani Sultanate, the Deccan fragmented into five major successor states. Ahmednagar, Bijapur, Golconda, Bidar, and Berar. Ahmednagar was ruled by the Nizam Shahis, Bijapur by the Adil Shahis, Golconda by the Qutub Shahis. These states constantly fought one another for territory, prestige, fort, influence. Although culturally sophisticated and economically prosperous, they suffered from chronic political instability, faction rivalries, and succession. हम्म ये वाली कर दे रहा दोनों कर दो Ahmednagar founded the Malik Ahmed Nizam in 1490, occupied an extremely strategic position in the northwestern Deccan. It controlled important routes connecting the Deccan Plateau with Gujarat, Malwa, and northern Indian plains. The kingdom was rich in agriculture, trade, forts, cavalry sources, and military manpower. For the Mughals, control over the Ahmednagar was essential because it acted as the gateway into the deeper Deccan. Akbar's interest in the Deccan increased gradually because the later part of the reign by the 1590s, the Mughal Empire had already consolidated Delhi, Agra, Rajputana, Gujarat, Bengal, Kabul, Kashmir, and much of North India. After conquering Gujarat in 1572 to 1573, the Mughal frontier moved much closer to the Deccan politically and geographically. Akbar increasingly viewed himself not merely as a ruler of North India, but as a universal emperor whose sovereignty should extend across the entire subcontinent. Another major factor behind the Mughal intervention was the internal weakness of Ahmednagar itself. Following the death of the ruler Burhan Nizam Shah II in 1595, a fierce succession struggle erupted within the kingdom. Different factions of the nobles supported rival claimants, and the state descended into instability. Akbar immediately recognized this opportunity for intervention. The Mughal court demanded Ahmednagar, that Ahmednagar acknowledged Mughal suzerainty, but the Deccan nobles refused. Akbar then dispatched Mughal army towards Ahmednagar under Prince Murad and the experienced General Abdur Rahim Khanan. The Mughal invasion marked the beginning of one of the most dramatic episodes in the Deccan history because resistance soon centered around the extraordinary figure Chand Bibi. Chand Bibi, also known as Chand Sultana, was the one who one of, was one of the most remarkable women in medieval Indian history. She was the daughter of Hussain Nazim Shah of Ahmednagar and had earlier been married into the Bijapur royal family. Intelligent, politically skilled, and militarily courageous, she emerged as regent for the young Bahadur Nizam Shah during the crisis. In 1595 to 1596, the Mughal seized the fort Ahmednagar. The Sultan inside the city became desperate. Mughal artillery bombarded the fortification continuously, supplies declined, and factional conflicts weakened internal unity. Yet, Chand Bibi personally organized the resistance. According to the several accounts, she appeared on the fort walls armed and veiled, encouraging soldiers and directing defense herself. Her leadership inspired fierce resistance against the Mughal siege. The Mughal army expected quick victory, but Chand Bibi's defense prolonged the siege significantly. Eventually, negotiations occurred. A compromise was reached in 1596. The Mughals received Berar, while Ahmednagar retained nominal independence under Bahadur Nizam Shah. However, neither side was satisfied with this arrangement. Conflict resumed almost immediately. In 1599, Akbar launched a much more determined campaign against Ahmednagar. This was the Mughal assault. This time, the Mughal assault became overwhelming. Chand Bibi attempted negotiating peace again because she realized prolonged resistance might destroy the kingdom completely. However, factions within Ahmednagar accused her falsely of treachery and secret collaboration with the Mughals. In one of the most tragic moments in Deccan history, Chand Bibi was murdered by her own nobles inside the fort. After her death, organized resistance collapsed rapidly. The Mughals captured Ahmednagar fort in 1600. Bahadur Nizam Shah was imprisoned and much of the kingdom formally came under the Mughal control. Akbar regarded this as a major imperial triumph because it represented the first serious Mughal penetration into the Deccan Sultanates. However, the annexation was far from complete in reality. Although the Mughal captured the capital and major territories, resistance continued fiercely across the countryside. The Deccan was geographically difficult terrain for the imperial occupation because it had rugged plateaus, hill forts, forest stones, mobile cavalry warfare, and decentralized local power structures, made stable Mughal administration extremely difficult. At this stage, another extraordinary figure emerged, and his name was Malik Amber. Malik Amber was originally an Ethiopian slave who rose through military and administrative talent to become the most powerful statesman of Ahmednagar after the Mughal conquest. He organized resistance against the Mughal authority and effectively received the Nizam Shahi state despite the fall of capital. Malik Amber proved to be one of the greatest anti-Mughal strategists in Indian history. He understood that the direct conventional warfare against the massive Mughal army would fail. Instead, he adapted mobile cavalry attacks, guerrilla tactics, scorched earth strategy, surprise raids, and rapid movement across difficult terrain. These methods repeatedly exhausted Mughal forces. He also organized the revenue system and recruited large number of Maratha horsemen into Deccan military service. Many many future Maratha military tradition developed partly within the system created under Malik Amber. Among the Maratha families serving Deccan states during this period were the ancestors of later Maratha leaders including Shahaji Bhosle, father of Shivaji. Malik Amber even established a new capital at Khadgi, known as Aurangabad, later known as Aurangabad. Under this leadership, Ahmednagar effectively revived despite Mughal attempts at annexation. Several Mughal campaigns failed against him, including expedition during Jahangir's reign. Jahangir himself became deeply frustrated with Malik Amber's resistance. Mughal chronicles repeatedly complain about his guerrilla tactics and ability to avoid decisive defeat. Prince Khurram, the future Shah Jahan, was eventually sent to Deccan to strengthen the Mughal campaign. Despite temporary Mughal success, Malik Amber continued resisting effectively until his death in 1626. After his death, the Nizam Shahi kingdom weakened rapidly because no leader possessed his military genius in political authority. By this stage, Shah Jahan had become emperor. Unlike Akbar, whose Deccan policy mixed diplomacy and conquest, Shah Jahan pursued far more direct imperial annexation. The Mughal intensified pressure upon Ahmednagar systematically. Internal factionalism against crippled the Nizam Shahi state. Rival nobles betrayed one another. Alliances shifted constantly, and the kingdom lost coherence. Meanwhile, the Mughals allied strategically with Bijapur at times to isolate Ahmednagar further. Finally, in 1633, the Mughals captured the great fort of Daulatabad, one of the strongest fortresses in India and the last major center of Nizam Shahi resistance. The young ruler Hussain Shah was imprisoned. In 1636, Shah Jahan formally annexed the remaining territories of Ahmednagar into the Mughal Empire. The Nizam Shahi dynasty effectively disappeared. However, the Mughal victory carried long term consequences. It later became disastrous for the empire itself. Continuous Deccan warfare militarized the region heavily and strengthened Maratha military groups who had served different Deccan powers. The Mughal expansion in the Deccan also dragged the empire into endless southern conflicts involving Bijapur, Golconda, and eventually the Marathas under Shivaji. Thus, the annexation of Ahmednagar became both a major triumph of Mughal imperial expansion and beginning of the long Deccan entanglement that eventually exhausted Mughal resources during Aurangzeb's reign. The struggle also demonstrated several larger historical realities: the importance of Deccan geography in resisting northern empires, the growing role of mobile cavalry warfare, the weakness created by factional politics within Deccan sultanates, and the emergence of Maratha military power within Deccan political structures. Chand Bibi became remembered as one of the greatest female defenders of Indian history because she resisted Mughal imperial expansion under almost impossible conditions. Malik Amber became legendary for pioneering forms of guerrilla warfare later associated strongly with Maratha resistance against the Mughals. Ultimately, the annexation of Ahmednagar was not merely the conquest of one kingdom. It marked the beginning of large-scale Mughal involvement in Deccan politics, the militarization of the Deccan Plateau, the rise of the new king regional warrior groups, and the start of a century-long imperial struggle that would eventually weaken the Mughal Empire itself. So this is the annexation of Ahmednagar by the Mughals in 1636. None of the options are correct answer. It was Shah Jahan who captured Ahmednagar in 1636, and after a strong resistance by two incredible rulers whose name is Chand Bibi and Malik Amber. So finally in 1636, Shah Jahan will capture Ahmednagar. Moving on. McMahon Line is a line which separates China with and which Indian state. So that is Arunachal Pradesh. McMahon Line is present in Arunachal Pradesh. The McMahon Line is a boundary that separates China from the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. The line was drawn in 1914 during the Shimla Convention, which was held between the representative of British India, Tibet, and China. The boundary was named after Henry McMahon, who was Foreign Secretary of British India and played main role in drawing the line. The McMahon Line was created to define the boundary between the Tibet and the northeastern frontier of British India. After India became independent, this boundary came to separate China from present-day Arunachal Pradesh. China has historically refused to officially recognize the McMahon Line because it disputes the political authority of Tibet to sign such agreements independently during that period. As a result, the boundary became a major source of tension between India and China. The region most closely associated with McMahon Line dispute is Arunachal Pradesh, which China often refers to South Tibet. The disagreement over the boundary became one of the major causes of the Sino-Indian War of 1962, during which fighting took place in the northeastern frontier region. The McMahon Line remains strategically and politically important because it forms a major part of eastern sector of disputed India-China border. The issue continues to influence the diplomatic tension, military deployment, and border negotiation between the two countries. The other options are incorrect because Sikkim is associated with different border arrangement, Uttarakhand belongs to another, Himalayan sector of India-China boundary, and Jammu and Kashmir is connected mainly with western sector and line of actual control. Therefore, the correct answer is Arunachal Pradesh. Moving on. The Paris Indian Society was Indian nationalist organization founded in which year? The Paris Indian National Nationalist Organization. Which year was it founded in? So it was founded in 1905. The Paris Indian Society was an Indian national organization founded in 1905 by the Indian revolutionaries living in Europe during the period of Indian freedom struggle against British rule. The organization was established in Paris and became an important center of revolutionary nationalist activities outside India. It was closely associated with prominent nationalist leaders such as Madam Bikaji Kama, Sardar Singh Rana, and uh, Mansher Shah Burjor, Burjorji Godrej. The Paris Indian National Society worked to spread nationalist ideas internationally and expose the British colonial policies in India before European audiences. It also provided support to Indian revolutionaries who had moved abroad to escape the British surveillance and repression. The organization became especially important after increasing British restriction on nationalist and revolutionary activities in India following events such as the partition of Bengal in 1905. Madame Bikaji Kama played a major role in activities of the Paris Indian Society. She became internationally famous for, unfurling an early version of Indian national flag at International Socialist Conference held at Stuttgart in Germany in 1907. The Paris Indian Society maintained links with other revolutionary organizations such as India House in London, revolutionary nationalist Europe groups in Europe, anti-colonial activities abroad. Why was it actually created? The Paris Indian National Society was created to support the Indian nationalist and revolutionary movement against the British colonial rule from outside India. During the early 20th century, many Indian nationalists and revolutionaries believed that the political activities inside India were being heavily suppressed by the British governments through censorship, arrest, surveillance, and repressive laws. Because of this, several revolutionary leaders moved to Europe where they could organize more freely and spread anti colonial ideas internationally. The society was founded in Paris in 1905 mainly by Indian nationalists such as Madame Bikaji Kama and Sardar Singh Rana. Paris became an important center because France provided relatively greater political freedom compared to Britain, allowing Indian revolutionaries to publish nationalist material and conduct political activities with less interference. One of the main reasons for the creation of the Paris Indian Society was growing anger against the British policies in India, especially after the partition of Bengal in 1905. The partition created widespread nationalist protests and increased revolutionary activities. Many nationalists felt that moderate constitutional methods were sufficient and that stronger resistance against the British rule was necessary. The society aimed to spread awareness against about the British exploitation in India, build international support for the Indian independence, unite Indian revolutionaries living abroad, publish nationalist and revolutionary literature, help political activists escaping British repression, promote the idea of complete independence from British rule. The British, the Paris Indian Society also acted as a center for communication between Indian revolutionaries in Europe and nationalist groups living in India. It maintained connections with organizations such as India House in London, which was another revolutionary center founded by Shyamji Krishna Varma. So, Paris Indian Society was founded in 1905 in Paris, of course, in France. Because France and Britain had their own rivalry, so it was easy for the Indian nationalists to find shelter in France and not get arrested. If they would have tried to do the same thing in Britain, it would have been much harder. And of course, it was impossible to do these things in India because India was a British colony. Moving on, which of the following metals was used to make weapons and tools in Harappan cities? So the metal which was used to make weapons and tools in Harappan cities was copper. Copper was the main metal used for making weapons and tools in the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization. The Harappan civilization flourished approximately between 2500 and 1900 BCE, belonged to the Chalcolithic Age or the Copper Stone Age, because people used both stone tools and copper-based metal objects. The Harappans had developed advanced knowledge of the metallurgy and metalworking. They used copper to manufacture a wide variety of practical tools and weapons such as axes, knives, chisels, fish hooks, spearheads, arrowheads, razors, and saws. These objects were important for agriculture, hunting, craft production, construction, and daily activities. The Harappans also used bronze, which was produced by mixing copper with tin. Bronze was stronger and more durable than pure copper and therefore useful became useful for making more efficient tools and objects. Because of this extensive use of copper and bronze, the Harappan civilization is also regarded as Bronze Age. So if they ever ask you which age or which civilization is regarded as Bronze Age, always remember it is Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, because Harappans knew how to make bronze. How do you make bronze? You have to mix copper and tin in a particular proportion. You need to have the knowledge of metallurgy, and clearly they had it. The Harappans obtained copper through mining and trade networks extending to regions such as Rajasthan, Balochistan, and possibly Oman. So, where did they get copper from? Rajasthan, Balochistan, and Oman. Their trade system was highly developed and connected different parts of the civilization as well as external regions. Harappan craftsmen showed considerable skills in smelting, casting, alloy making, and metal shaping. Archaeological excavation at Harappan cities have revealed yeah, it is okay have revealed furnaces, molds, and metal artifacts, indicating specialized craft production. The other options are obviously incorrect. We don't have to get into that. So, Copper Age or the Bronze Age is related with Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Harappan Age. Do or die was a slogan given by which of the following freedom fighters? Do or die was a slogan given by Mahatma Gandhi in 1942 at the beginning of Quit India movement. The slogan "Do or Die" was given by Mahatma Gandhi during Quit India movement in 1942. The slogan was delivered by Gandhi in his famous speech at the Bombay session of All India Congress Committee held on 8th August 1942 at Gowalia Tank Maidan, now known as August Kranti Maidan. The Quit India movement was launched during the Second World War when Indian nationalists demanded an immediate end to the British rule in India. Gandhi believed that the time had come for a final mass struggle against the colonial rule and therefore gave a powerful call "Do or Die". The slogan meant that Indians should either achieve independence or sacrifice themselves in the struggle, but should not continue living under the British domination. It became one of the most inspiring and emotionally powerful slogans of the Indian freedom movement. Soon after the movement began, the British government arrested Gandhi and other major Congress leaders. Despite severe repression, protest strikes, demonstrations, and underground revolutionary activities spread across many parts of India. The Quit India movement became one of the most important phases of Indian struggle because it showed the strong determination of Indians for complete independence and significantly weakened the British moral authority in India. The other options are incorrect because Bal Gangadhar Tilak is associated with the slogan "Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it." Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel is associated with Bardoli Satyagraha and national integration, and Motilal Nehru was an important Congress leader but was not associated with "Do or Die" slogan. Battle of Plassey was fought between the English Company and the Nawab of Bengal in 1757. Obviously, very easy question. The battle from the Britishers side, who was fighting? From the Britishers side, Robert Clive was fighting, and from the Bengal side, who was fighting? From the Bengal side, Sirajuddaula was fighting. Very, very easy. Next. Krishna the third of the Manikhed belonged to which dynasty? So from Manikhed, who is ruling? From Manikhed, the Rashtrakutas are ruling. So Krishna the third belonged to Rashtrakud dynasty. Krishna the third of Manikhed belonged to Rajput dynasty. The Rashtrakuta dynasty was one of the most important dynasties of early medieval India and ruled large parts of the Deccan between the 8th and the 9th century CE. Their capital was Manikhed, located in present-day Karnataka. Krishna the Third is one of the last great rulers of the Rashtrakud dynasty and is remembered for his military achievement and expansion of the Rashtrakud power. During his reign, Rashtrakuta reached the peak of their influence in South India. Krishna the Third conducted military campaigns against several South Indian powers, including the Cholas, the Pandyas, and the Cheras. He achieved an important victory against the Chola and temporarily occupied Kanchipuram and Tanjore, which demonstrated Rashtrakuta military strength in South India. The Rashtrakutas were important participants in the tripartite struggle for control over Kannauj, along with the Palas and Gurjar Pratiharas. They became an important they became famous for their military power, administration, patronage of art and literature, and temple architecture. One of the greatest achievements associated with the Rashtrakuta was the construction of Kailash temple at Ellora, built during the reign of Krishna I. The temple is regarded as one of the greatest examples of rock cut architecture in India. The other options are incorrect because the Cheras ruled parts of Kerala and Tamil regions, and the Palas ruled Bengal and Bihar, and the Gurjar Pratiharas ruled northern and western India. Therefore, the correct answer is the Rashtrakutas. So remember that Manikhet used to be one of the capitals of Rashtrakuta dynasty. So Krishna III of Manikhet has to belong to the Rashtrakutas. Next, which one of the following is not associated with Aryabhat? Stated that day and night were caused by the rotation of Earth on its axis. So he said that he was a mathematician. So all the calculations regarding the in cosmology, all the calculation regarding cosmos, he will make those statements. So he did say that day and night were caused by the rotation of the Earth on its axis. Developed a scientific explanation for eclipses? Yes, he did. Founded a way of calculating the circumference of circle? Yes, he did. Spoke about the elaborate surgical procedure? Now this is a medical thing, and he does not belong to the field of medicine. He does not belong to the field of biology. So he will not say that. So option D is wrong. Only three options are correct. So this is this. I'm sorry. Which of the following he did not say? So he did not say this. Option D is the right answer. D. He did not say anything elaborate about surgeries. Aryabhatta was one of the greatest mathematicians and astronomers of ancient India and is mainly associated with mathematics, astronomy, planetary motion, eclipses, and calculations related in geometry and numbers. He is not associated with detailed surgical procedures. Aryabhatta correctly explained that day and night were caused by the rotation of rotation of Earth on its axis. Solar and lunar eclipses occur because of shadows and planetary motions rather than mythology. Mathematical methods could be used to calculate measurements such as circumference of a circle. He wrote the famous work Aryabhatiya, which contains important ideas related to mathematics and astronomy. The statement about elaborate surgical procedures is associated not with Aryabhatta but with Shushruth, who is regarded as one of the earliest surgeons in world history. Sushruth's work, Sushruth Samhita, contains detailed description of surgery, surgical instrument, medical treatment, and anatomy. Therefore, the statement not associated with Aryabhat is speaking about elaborate surgical procedure. Option D is the right answer. Nagbhat was the king of which of the following dynasty? Now, Nagbhat is a Pratihar ruler, Gurjar Pratihar ruler. He is also going to participate in the tripartite struggle against the Palas and the Rashtrakutas. And Nagbhat, is also going to protect Indian territories from the Western invasion by the Arabians, by the Arabs. So Nagbhat belongs to the Gurjar Pratihar. Nagbhat was a ruler of the Gurjar Pratihar dynasty, which was one of the most powerful dynasty of early medieval northern India. The Gurjar Pratihar ruled large parts of the western and the northwestern India during the 8th and the 11th century CE and became an important political force in regions such as Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Gangetic Plains. Nagbhat I is regarded as one of the one of early important rulers who strengthened the foundation of the Pratihar power. He is especially remembered successfully resisting Arab invasion into the western India during the 8th century CE. After the Arabs conquered the Sindh, they attempted to expand further into the Indian territory, but Nagbhat I defeated the Arab forces and prevented their deeper political expansion into northern India. Because of this, the Pratihars gained military prestige and political influence. The Gurjar Pratihar later emerged as one of the three major dynasties involved in the famous tripartite struggle, along with the Pala dynasty and the Rashtrakuta dynasty. These three powers fought for control over Kannauj, along with the Palas and Rashtrakutas. These three powers fought to control over Kannauj, which had become politically prestigious and strategically important after the decline of Harsha, because Kannauj used to be a capital of Harsha. Kannauj used to be the capital of Harshvardhan. The Pratiharas are also known for their contribution to the temple architecture, regional administration, and political consolidation in northern India. Under the later rulers, such as the Mihir Bhoj, the dynasty reached its height of its power. Remember that Mihir Bhoj is considered as the greatest Gurjar Pratihar ruler. Greatest. The other options are incorrect because the Kakatiyas belong to the later Deccan dynasty and the Vardhan dynasty is associated with Harshvardhan. And the Reddy emerged much later in the South India. Gurjar Pratihara dynasty and the Nagbhat the first. Let's get to know a bit about him. The Gurjar Pratihar dynasty was one of the most powerful dynasty of the early medieval India and played a major role in political history of the northern and the western India between the 8th and the 11th century CE. The Pratiharas emerged during a period when a large regional kingdom was rising after the decline of the major imperial power such as the Empire of Harsha. The dynasty gradually established control over large regions including Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Gangetic Plains. The term Pratihara is believed to mean doorkeeper or protector, and according to some tradition, the rulers claim descendant from Lakshman, the brother of Lord Ram, who acted as a protector of Pratihar for Ram. Because of this, the dynasty is often called as Gurjar Pratiharas. The Pratiharas became historically important because they acted as a major political military power in the northern India at a time when the foreign invasion and regional rivalries were increasing. They are especially remembered for resisting the Arab expansion after the Arab conquest of Sindh in the 8th century CE. One of the earliest and most important ruler of the dynasty is Nagbhat I. He is generally regarded as the founder of the Pratihar political power and ruled during the 8th century CE. Nagbhat Nagbhat I established his authority mainly in the western India, especially in regions around Rajasthan and Malwa. Nagbhat I became famous primarily because of his successful resistance against the Arab invasion. So Nagbhat I ruled from 730 to 760 CE. He was the founder of the imperial Pratihara dynasty, known for successfully repelling the Arab invasion. So who's the founder of the Pratihara dynasty? क्या हुआ बंद कर दूं? ठीक है. ये हो जाता है उससे सोने से पहले मसल थोड़ी हिलती है. So Nagbhat I is founder of Gurjar Pratihar dynasty, the imperial Gurjar Pratihar dynasty. After the Arabs conquered the Sindh under Muhammad bin Qasim in the early 8th century, Arab governors attempted to expand further into the northwestern and western dynasty, Western India. These invasions threatened many regional kingdoms of India. Nagbhat I successfully defeated Arab forces advancing from Sindh and prevented deeper Arab political expansion into the Indian interior. The victory was historically extremely important because it limited Arab territorial expansion in northern India and strengthened the military prestige of the Pratiharas. Because of his success, Nagbhat I emerged as a major regional power and laid the foundation for future Pratihara expansion. Now, Nagbhat I also expanded Pratihar influence into important parts of western and central India. He consolidated the political authority in Rajasthan and nearby areas and strengthened the military structure of the kingdom. His rule helped transform the Pratiharas from regional power into an important dynasty capable of competing with other political major kingdoms of India. The Pratiharas during this period also benefited from control over the trade routes and strategically important territories connecting the western India with the Gangetic region. Their growing power later enabled them to participate in the famous tripartite struggle, which became one of the defining political conflict of the early medieval India. The tripartite struggle was fought among the Gurjar Pratiharas, the Palas, the Rashtrakutas for control over Kannauj, which had become politically prestigious after the decline of Harsha. Possession of Kannauj symbolized imperial authority over northern India. Nagbhat the first importance lies not only in military success but also in stabilizing a strong political base for future Pratihar rulers. He strengthened the administration, military organization, and territorial control, which later rulers used to expand the empire further. After Nagbhat I, the Pratihar dynasty continued to grow under rulers such as Kakustha, Devraj, Vatsaraj, Nagbhat II, and the greatest Mehir Bhoj. The dynasty, so you can see that they consistently had great rulers, because of which they became a great dynasty. The problem with the other dynasties was that they were not able to produce great rulers one after the other. While the Pratiharas, Nagbhat the one, then will come Kakust, then will come Devraj, then will come Vatsaraj, then will come Nagbhat the second, Mehir Bhoj, great rulers one after the other. The dynasty reached the height of its power under Mehir Bhoj, who became one of the greatest Pratihara ruler and expanded the empire across large parts of northern India. The Pratihara also became important patrons of temple architecture, Sanskrit learning, art, and religion. Many temples in Rajasthan and central India are associated with Pratihara influence. However, over time the dynasty weakened because of the continuous war with the Rashtrakutas and the Palas, internal conflicts, and the rise of the regional powers. By the 11th century, Pratihara political authority had largely declined and new regional kingdoms emerged in northern India. Nagbhat the First remains historically significant because he laid the foundation of the Gurjar Pratihar power, resisted the Arab invasion into India, strengthened political authority in the Western India, and helped create one of the most powerful dynasty of the early medieval northern India. Who won the tripartite struggle? It was mostly, I would say, it was the Gurjar Pratihar. But there was no one clear winner forever. During times Gurjar Pratihar dominated, during times the Rajputas dominated, and there were phases when the Palas also dominated. But the one particular dynasty who will be able to control Kannauj for a very long period of time and who will be able to create an administration over Kannauj, who will be able to create a rule over Kannauj wherein Kannauj will become an important part of their empire, that is going to be Gurjar Pratihar. The tripartite struggle did not produce one permanent or absolute winner because the conflict continu- uh, continued for nearly 2 centuries among the Gurjar Pratihar, the Palas, and the Rajputas for control over the politically prestigious city of Kannauj. Why do they want to control Kannauj? Because Kannauj was the capital of Harshvardhan, who was from the Vardhan dynasty. Now, Harshvardhan was the last great ruler of ancient India. If you control Kannauj, then you were basically the Kannauj acted as a political center in the mind of the people. Doesn't matter how prosperous or how militarily strong you had become, until and unless you had the control over Kannauj, nobody would have counted you as a great imperial power. So it was very important for these dynasties to make control over Kannauj, and the one who was able to consolidate their empire over Kannauj, they became the imperial rulers. But we will realize that almost none of these dynasties will be able to consolidate Kannauj under their rule for a very long period of time. However, Gurjar Pratiharas are generally considered the most successful dynasty in the struggle because they managed to establish the more stable and longer lasting control over Kannauj and large parts of northern India during the peak of their power. The struggle began after the death of Harsha in the 7th century CE. After Harsha's empire declined, Kannauj became one of the most powerful, one of the most important political centers of the northern India. The city occupied a strategic position in the fertile Gangetic plain and was economically prosperous as well as politically prestigious. Control over Kannauj symbolized imperial authority over North India, and therefore several major dynasties attempted to capture it. The Palas, under rulers such as Dharampal, expanded westward from Bengal and Bihar, and initially gained influence over Kannauj through military campaigns and alliances. The Rajputas from Deccan repeatedly invaded northern India under rulers such as Dhruva Dharvarsh and Govinda III. So Dharampal, he's ruling from the East India, from Bengal and Bihar. From Gurjar Pratihar, they have a ruler, and from South, we have people like Dhruva Dharvarsh and Govinda III, who belongs to the Rajput dynasty. Although the Rajputas defeated both the Palas and Pratiharas several times, but they could not maintain permanent control over Kannauj because their main political base remained in Deccan India. So even a large number of times, the Rajputas would come to the north, they would defeat both the Gurjar Pratihar and the Palas. That's how powerful they were. But because their main political center was in Deccan India, they will actually never be able to consolidate their empire over Kannauj, and hence Kannauj will never be in their grasp for a long period of time. As soon as a powerful king would come, or a powerful or even a moderate powerful king would come in north or the northeast or the northwest, Kannauj will slip off from the grasp of the Rashtrakutas. The Gurjar Pratihar gradually emerged as the strongest northern power under the rulers such as Nagbhat II and especially Meher Bhoj. They established relatively stable authority over Kannauj and controlled extensive territories across northern and western India. Because of their stronger and more sustained hold over Kannauj, historians generally regard Gurjar Pratihars as one of the most successful participants in tripartite struggle. The continuous warfare among these dynasties weakened all three power over time and contributed to the political fragmentation in early medieval India. Eventually, the Palas, the Rashtrakutas, and the Pratiharas all declined, leading to a rise of new regional kingdoms. Thus, although no dynasty became the permanent undisputed ruler of Kannauj, the Gurja Pratiharas achieved the greatest long-term advantage and are usually considered the most successful power in tripartite struggle. So if they ever ask you who was the winner of tripartite struggle and they give Gurja Pratihar as one of the options, you can mark that answer. The best answer to this question would be no dynasty. But if no dynasty is not the option and Gurja Pratihar is the option, mark Gurja Pratihar as the answer. Because it's a very subjective thing, right? What do you consider as a victory? If you consider victory as something which lasts for centuries and centuries, then no dynasty won. But if you look at which dynasty controlled Kannauj for a very long period of time, that would be Gurjar Pratihar. Moving on, Chola inscription mentions several categories of land, which one of the following land was known as gifted to the temples. Which land was gifted to the temples? So it's pretty obvious it is Devadhan, Devadan, Dan which is for Dev. Brahmadaya was villages which only had Brahmins. During the Chola period, there used to be villages where only Brahmins used to stay. Those villages were called as Brahmadaya villages. Devdan is land which is given to for temples. The Chola rulers maintained a highly organized system of land administration and revenue classification. Their inscription mentions several categories of land grants given for religions, education, administrative and charitable purposes. Among these, Devadan referred specifically to land donated to temples. The term Devadan literally means gift to God, gifting something to God, something for God. These lands were granted to temples so that temple authorities could use the income generated from the agriculture and taxation for temple maintenance, religious rituals, festivals, feeding pilgrims, salaries of the priest and temple workers. Culture and educational activities. During the Chola period, temples functioned not only as religious centers, well, during Chola period, temple functioned not only as religious centers but also as major economic and administrative institutions. Large temples controlled extensive land, employed many people, and played an important role in local society and economy. The other categories mentioned in the Chola inscription had different meanings. Brahmadeya referred to the grants made to the Brahmins, usually tax-free villages given for religion and scholarly purposes. Shalabhog generally referred to the land assigned for the maintenance of a school or feeding houses connected with Brahmins and students. Palichichandam referred to land grants made to Jain or Buddhist religious institutions. The Chola inscriptions are historically very important because they provide detailed information about the administration, taxation, village organization, irrigation, temple economy, and land revenue in medieval South India. Therefore, correct answer is Devadam. Moving on, established in 1867 at Bombay, Dash sought to remove caste restriction, abolish child marriages, and encourage the education of women. What was it? All these three things were abolition of child marriage, caste restriction, and education of women were taken up by Pratna Samaj. Now, if it had abolition of sati practice, then probably something like Brahma Samaj would have worked. Or if it had something like going back to the Vedas or promoting the idea that Veda had all the knowledge, then Arya Samaj would be the answer. Abolition of caste, only abolition of caste, then Satya Samaj would be the answer. Satyashodak Samaj. But because education of women, child marriage, all of these things have been mentioned, the only good answer is Pratna Samaj. Pratna Samaj. The Pratna Samaj was established in Bombay in 1867 and became one of the major social and religious reform movements of the 19th century, Western India. It was founded by Atmaram Pandurang and who was strongly influenced by the ideas of Brahma Samaj and reformist thought emerging during the colonial period. The organization was created to reform Hindu society and remove several social evils that were deeply rooted in Indian society at that time. The Pratna Samaj worked for the removal of caste restriction, abolition of child marriage, removal of the widow remarriage, encouragement of women's education, and improvement of social condition of women and lower caste. The members believed that the social reform was necessary for moral and intellectual progress of society. The movement strongly opposed untouchability, rigid caste division, and discriminatory social customs. It discouraged ideas of social equality, monotheism, and ethical religious practices. Unlike some reformers who completely rejected the traditional religion, and the Pratna Samaj attempted gradual reform within the Hindu society while maintaining devotional religious practices. Important leaders associated with the movement include Mahadev Govind Ranade, R.G. Bhandarkar, and N.G. Chandwarkar. Among them, Mahadev Govind Ranade played a particular important role in promoting social reforms, female education, widow remarriage, and modern political and religious reform. The Pratna Samaj also supported educational institutions and reformist activities aimed at creating more modern and socially progressive society. The movement became important because it contributed significantly to the broader 19th century India social reform movement and influenced educated middle class society in Western India. The other options are obviously incorrect because Arya Samaj was founded in 1875, Satyashodak Samaj was established in 1873 with a stronger anti-caste focus, and Ved Samaj had a separate reform movement associated mainly with South India. Therefore, the correct answer is Prathna Samaj. Prathna Samaj. Okay, now for the next lecture, I'll see you in the next video. Moving on.